I'm Paul Sullivan, your host on the Company of Dads podcast, where we explore the sweet, sublime, strange, and silly aspects of being a lead dad in a world where men often feel they have to hide or at least not talk about their parenting role. I know this from firsthand experience as a lead dad to my 3 girls, 3 dogs, 3 cats, and somewhat remarkably 3 fish who are still alive. I did all this while managing my career and striving to be an above average husband. One thing I know for sure about being a lead dad is it's not a normal role. You're not doing what dads have traditionally done, going to work and leaving the parenting to mom or someone else. Nor are you always welcome into the world where moms are the primary caregivers. But here, the Company of Dads, our goal is to shake all that off and focus on what really matters: family, friendship, finance, and fun. Today, my guest is Nathan Richardson, entrepreneur, newly transplanted Florida man, and single lead dad. Nathan has had a remarkable career in technology. It goes back to the 1990s when Yahoo was the hottest tech property on the planet. He also worked at media companies like Dow Jones and Bloomberg. He helped create Gilt, a wonderful fashion site, and he's also been a mentor to New York City's Educational Development Corporation. In 2013, he became the father to twins, a Girl Scout and a boy dag. They're now in the 3rd grade. Last year, during the pandemic, they moved from New York to Miami. Welcome, Nathan, to the Company of Dads podcast. How are you today?
Thanks, Paul. Excited to be here with you today.
Yeah, thanks, pal. A little nice sort of, Miami day that you experienced there, much better than my Connecticut day. Is that fair to say?
I think it's fair to say that I ran on the beach this morning and broke a sweat rather than froze my tush off running along the west side of Manhattan.
All right, you win. You win there. I did a little sun on my face this morning, so that made me feel better. Let's start off by talking a bit about balance. I mean, you've had a remarkable career, but your kids are 8 years old now. So you've been a dad, as I said, since 2013. What have been some of the biggest challenges as a single lead dad, particularly as you think of like the different stages that your kids have been through?
So I would say that I'm super fortunate that I've always had a supportive network around me, and I've had a nanny with me and the kids from the beginning. So, I realize and recognize that's a very, privileged position to come from. At the same time, I'm a single parent and I had a career. I have a career and I sit on a couple of boards. So my professional life is quite robust and busy and requires travel. So, how have I found balance and sort of what are the parameters? One is, nothing is black and white. Sometimes it's going to be a little bit gray. So the things that I always strive for are I run every morning before my kids get up. I am able to do that to keep my sanity. I am there for them in the morning and I make sure I drop them off at school. So we have a lot of conversations and we get quality time then. I will say that while we were in New York, I was home at least 4 nights a week. And during the pandemic, obviously I've been home a heck of a lot more than that. The lines in New York are a lot harder to draw because you're always chasing the siren call of that next cocktail party or opening or show or event or work dinner. And so in New York, I found it a lot more challenging to say, okay, these are the nights I'm committed to being home with the kids, part of the routine, in the sausage factory of the messy parts of bedtime, getting kids ready for bedtime, getting them fed, getting them decompressed and asleep. So that definitely has been something that's been consistent throughout my kids' 8 years of life.
When you think about the flip side of that, I mean, there is always something to do in New York, and it's hard to say no because you're not quite sure, is this going to be a fun time, or is this going to be the type of party where I meet somebody who's going to be fantastic for my career? But the flip side of that, I mean, did you find that once your kids were at least in, pre-K, the nursery school pre-K, and then going on to elementary school, did you find the parents in New York where you were living, like sort of supportive of you as a lead dad and welcoming of you as a lead dad, or were you still, the outsider dad and amongst the mom mafia?
I will tell you that some of my closest friends have come from the preschool and nursery school, as well as from the kindergarten experience. And I'd been in New York for 20 years 15 years before I had kids. And I have a great social network and a great professional network. but the parents were next level, and they had my back in ways that I didn't expect, both the moms and the dads. So I can give you instances where, you know, the nanny overheard some parents talking about, oh, those kids they have that gay dad. And the moms went after the other mom and were like, you know what? Chill out.
Wow.
If you're going to say that to the kids, you better bring it to me first. So they took numbers. Similarly, some of the dads,
that's a tough group. I like that group of moms you were hanging with. That's good.
they're amazing. You know, and similarly, like there was one time where my daughter was sick and my son needed to go to a birthday party, and you know, the dad and one of the dads like, hey, we gotcha. And my son went and had a great time. So the parents have been really amazing. My parent group in New York was really terrific. We went on vacations with them. The other thing is it's really diverse. The parents that we met at PS 41 ranged from well-known authors to well-known musicians to bar owners and finance people and venture capitalists. So, and most of the parents work. So it was a very diverse set of people, of both men and women that were working. So we were all in it together and all having fun, trying to work it out and make sure we had some fun ourselves, but also got our kids into, you know, the best education possible.
Yeah. You know, my kids are, you know, all girls, 12, 9, and 4. And I look at the 12-year-old and she's, you know, she thinks she's completely self-sufficient. The 9-year-old is fairly self-sufficient, and the 4-year-old is the toughest one in the group, but she is still 4. And so on the weekends, you know, I get kind of a break, and my wife, you know, kind of hands things off. But what was it like for you, you know, come the weekend? I mean, we all want a break. Was that, you know, did you find a way with the other parents around PS 41 and the other parents in your community in New York to sort of, you know, take your kids on a play date so you could just go get a cup of coffee for an hour, just go read the paper for an hour?
So I've been pretty good at finding a space for that. And again, I knew that I would need to recharge on the weekends. And so I had a weekend babysitter that would come and help me out so I could go running. And then so I could read the paper, to your point. And that babysitter is a great friend to this day, and someone the kids think is like the funnest person ever. And so I basically, I wouldn't have wanted to hand off if they had a play date, great, but I didn't want to, you know, pass around the burden, although happy to have play dates. Now that they're older, what I found is that they're doing tennis on the weekend and spending 2 hours there. And that's 2 hours I can walk out the tennis center, go for a run, get some shopping done. I've been reading the FT every weekend. I'm able to do things that just are easy on my mind and my body, and I don't worry about it. It's 2 hours. Literally, I look at the weather all week long to hope that it is not raining on Saturday morning so I can have that 2-hour break.
So are you telling me that we'll get to your move to Miami where they're playing tennis, but are you telling me that you're not standing courtside and yelling at your kids like, come on, Scout, dig it out? That's not you?
I at the risk of alienating the 2 parents that are at courtside at this private lesson yelling at their kid, I am not. And I withhold judgment on them for doing that. If that's how they want to raise their kid and what they want to be, how they want to be involved, good for them. But I think I would be like the worst hockey dad. I would be like right in their face yelling. And a great friend of mine who's another lead dad named Jeff Millay, who's at Twitter, he's a coach. And he said to me, you know, the only thing you can say to your kids at the end of any game is, how do you feel you did?
Right.
And I was like, oh my gosh, that's going to kill me. So I now have this discipline of saying to my kids, how do you feel you did? And all I get back is good.
We've actually done that with, because our oldest is now starting to get grades. She's in 6th grade, and they didn't, you know, they ridiculous grades before, you know, proficient, sufficient, you know, deficient. I don't know what they were. And she's doing pretty well, but she'll come home and she'll say, you know, I got an A or I got an A-. Or some days she'll come home and say, you know, she didn't understand something. She'll say, I got an 82. Can you believe I got an 82? And fortunately, both my wife and I are on the same page in which we'll say, well, did you try your hardest? Yeah. Did you study? Yeah. All right, then 82 is the best you could do. And that's fine, but that just means that you probably have a little bit more to learn. And we've been like that with all of our kids because we both know this. I mean, life is tough. Life beats you up. And, I feel like you want to just instill in your kids, try the hardest you can. And when it comes to sports, we've done it where, when my kids were younger, I was never the sort of courtside dad yelling, but I was a dad who insisted that they do certain things. And it didn't work. I was like, all right, what do you want to do? Like, I thought like they should play soccer. I was a horrible team sport athlete, horrible. I only played individual sports. So I was like, just go play a team sport. Like it'll teach you skills that I don't have. And they hated it. And so then we made this rule that was, okay, you can't do nothing. You have to do something, but you need to pick what that something is going to be. And, one of my daughters plays tennis. The other one likes to swim. The other actually plays golf with me. So therefore, if she's listening, she's going to make out the best in the will come 40 years down the road. But it was like that sort of allowed, to let them sort of feel some sense of empowerment. It wasn't like we were sort of saying, you must do this. It was like, you have to do something. So, make a choice.
What age was that when you did that?
I would say it was before the pandemic. It was before the pandemic because and it worked better for the younger kids because you obviously have twins of the same age, but I learned a lot from my first daughter, and I remember she was convinced she wanted to do this thing. It was called the Parisi Speed School, and they're going to teach you how to run fast. And I was like, all right, that's what you want to do. And she did the tryout for it, and she made it. And I said, do you want to do this? And the guy was sitting there. He was like Mr. Parisi Speed guy. I said, yeah, sure, Dad, I'll do it. I said, okay. We get to be like the second practice for the Parisi Speed School. And she's like, Dad, I hate it. I said, well, we're here. Said, well, but I didn't want to tell the guy I didn't want to do it. And I said, well, guess what, Virginia? This is a wonderful lesson. Always speak your mind and know that your parents have paid X amount of dollars for the Parisi Speed School. So you will be finishing the next 9 sessions. But going forward, and it was a great lesson for her because she hated it. We made her go. But after that, she learned to sort of have a voice, and she learned to say, you know what? I don't want to do this. I'm like, okay, that's fine. I'm glad you're telling me now.
Tell me it was at 5:30 in the morning.
No, it wasn't. It was like Friday at like 5:00. And it was at the Y, and it was a low lift for me. I'd go get a cup of coffee and relax and read and watch her do it. And she was a trooper. She had at it, but she complained before and she complained after. But it taught her a valuable lesson of, don't just say yes to something you don't want to do, particularly when you don't have to do it.
So I'm living through that. My kids wanted to do the running club, and my son does, because he likes to be a fast runner. And that requires we get up at 6:15, we're out the door at 6:30. And his sister said, well, I'm going to do it if he's doing it, but she doesn't want to keep doing it. And I'm like, well, there's only one of me in the morning. You're either doing it all together, all for one, or one for all. And so you either do it or he doesn't do it. And so I said, next year we can evaluate what we do, but I'm not, going back and forth just because you've changed your mind. So clearly running clubs hit a nerve with young girls.
With little kids. I love it. I mean, talk to me about that, the having, twins, but one boy, one girl, but obviously the same age, and how you split up. They're going to have different interests. And the older they get, the more their interests are going to diverge. But as you said, there's just one you. And while you've been fortunate to have some help, some babysitters here and there, you want to be there. So how do you balance that to let them do what they want to do, but also check it against reality that, we haven't cloned Nathan yet?
It was a lot easier pre-pandemic, for sure, because it was easy to have play dates for him and play dates for her, or he wanted to do this activity and she wanted to do this activity, and things were open, and they were in different classes as well. Since the pandemic, the schools had put them in the same class, and we were pretty much together as a unit for the last year and a half. So they've spent a lot of time together. But what's been interesting is that they have developed different interests. So she would be happy to spend all her time reading a Kindle. Mm-hmm. And he would be happy, doing boy things, taking things apart and putting them back together. I'm stereotyping, but like very much like, bonehead things that little boys do. He thinks a whoopee cushion is like the best invention. So,
So do I, Nathan, and I'm 48.
so the little boys do the same thing, right? That's what he wants to do. And she wants to read a book. And she's like, why is he doing that with the again? So he's that's the way it is. And in terms of interests, I do try to have them break up and do different things. And either I'll take one away for an hour and the other one will stay with the nanny, and then we'll switch. So I try to find ways to get them apart. But it's hard. It's not like we've set up a standing date. And I've had some great parents who told me, with twins, you've got to find individual time with each of them so that they are able to really flourish and have that distinct relationship with you.
Yeah. One of the things you've heard me say this, but at the Company of Dads, I'm trying to create a community for lead dads. But when you have children, so much of your community is that town, that neighborhood where you live. Like the town where I live in Connecticut, it's perfectly fine. It's nice. But, are there other towns that are just as nice for raising my kids? Of course. But to move would be difficult because we have these connections in the community. They have their friends. You obviously had that living in New York, the PS41 group, and you had those connections. But tell me about what happened in the pandemic that you said, I want to try something different. I want to give up the slushy streets and the subway for, the sun and beach and, afternoon tennis of Miami.
So it does sound cliche, but we were visiting Miami the weekend the school shut down. And the friend we were staying with said, why are you going back to walk up in New York City? That's 1,000 square feet with 2 kids. This will pass in 2 weeks. Just stay with me for 2 weeks. Well, it obviously didn't last 2 weeks. And I got a very quick view of how things were going to go down with the schools and with what was happening in the city. So we just stayed, and I made the call that first June that, based on my experience with how the education system was faring, I thought we'd be better off staying here in Florida and having more space.
Yeah.
And it was a very emotional call. I mean, you don't just leave someone after 20 years, but it's been a great thing. The schools are open. For better or worse, Miami has been a pretty functioning place the entire pandemic. There's some quiet moments, but it's been very vibrant. I mean, there's been traffic for much longer than I think there has anywhere else. And we've fortunately, knock on wood, we've been safe. So the weather is great. The kids are happy. The school is great. It has been slower, partly because of the pandemic and meeting a community of people that have kids. So we've started building more friendships with other parents and that have kids and hanging out with them. But, I'm a New Yorker. I was an outsider. On top of that, my construct isn't usual. It's not easy to say, oh, let's have a couples dinner when I'd be the third wheel. Mm-hmm. Or, how did you have these kids? There's so many questions that have to be answered in order to understand who I am we are as a family. Did you adopt these kids? Did your wife die? Did you have a partner? Did you go through surrogacy? So all those sort of things have been, left unanswered for a lot of people who may.
And are you saying that those are questions that get asked more in Miami or New York, or they get asked more because people are now meeting you with your kids who are 8 years old, as opposed to knowing you with your kids from the day they were born?
It's the latter. So people are just like, how did this all happen? We moved and a neighbor said, I don't know. And she finally said, like, how long have you and Damaris been together? Damaris, the nanny? And I'm like, no, she's not my wife. She's the kid's nanny. And the woman's like, oh, I was so confused how this all was happening. And I'm like, so there's a lot of confusion around, like, who are these people and how did that family come to be and what's the backstory? And so I've done more of just educating people on who we are as a family. And it's been as simple as sending a Christmas card or a holiday card with, a family picture so they can see this is who we are.
Yeah. And look, as parents, as dads, we're sort of hardwired to protect our children and to sort of, ease them into the world. Has this been something that's been something you've had to deal with more, or has it affected your son and daughter as well? Or are they
So
just, yeah.
no, my kids have been pretty, I think kids are pretty resilient, and I think they are much more resilient than we give them credit for. They've been great through the pandemic. They know that I'm always going to be here. They know that they have each other. They know school is a constant, that we have activities, and that we have, we stay in touch with family and we stay in touch with friends. I think if anything, you know, they haven't seen as many of my friends around, or who my social network is. And that's partly on me. I was waiting to get through the pandemic. So it's coming together. It's a little more, it took 20 years in New York, and all of a sudden I'm like starting fresh in Miami.
Yeah. Yeah. When you told me a story a while ago about going to parents' night at your kid's school in Miami, and you showed up and you were, not the only lead dad there, the only dad there. And now, in telling me that story, I realized that probably wasn't something that happened when you were in New York. And again, that's something that you, as the father, are dealing with. Your kids are at home in bed, kids don't go to parents' night. But has it gotten better in the months that you've been in Miami, and the months that your kids have been in the Miami school, to sort of, become part of the community?
Totally. So it was a eye opener. The Miami Beach is a suburb, effectively. It's no different. It's not a city. New York City is like, people have jobs and careers, and families are, working, both parents are working, or they're, everyone's involved, and the parents are very involved. In Miami, it's a little bit more traditional. And, so the construct is a little different to go to parents' night. But it turns out, since that time, I've definitely met other parents through going to, now that the birthday party circuit is back, meeting parents where there are moms and dads and getting to know them. And interestingly, one of the dads who we've had play dates with, I'd never seen him on the WhatsApp group for the class. And all of a sudden he's showing up, and he's a successful lawyer, and his wife works. And it's just been, it like gives me a sense of like relief that I'm not the only dad on the WhatsApp group. Because last year it was like, hey moms, did you get the homework? Or hey moms, there was no acknowledgement that there might be someone that doesn't have a mom.
So I'm doing my third tour as a class parent for my daughters. And the first one I did, I went in not knowing anything. And it's like, why not? My wife said, why don't you do it? I don't have time to do it. And I said, yeah, I'll do this. Why not? I got daughters. They should see that there could be a class dad. And so the first one was, was fine. It was just fine. But then, having done it for one, the middle child said, well, Dad, you have to do it for me. And so I said, okay, all right, I did it for her. But this is back in elementary school. Now my daughter's in 6th grade. And she asked me, last year, she says, Dad, will you be the class dad? Will you be the class parent? And I'm thinking to myself, I'm not going to say no. I would never say no, but I'll do it. And this is, where we live in Connecticut, pretty traditional town. And everything is on Zoom. And we have the first meeting, and everyone's there. And they announce, everyone says their name. And the person leading it says, okay, class moms, so good to have you here, class moms. And I was like, and dad, like, hey, all right, moms, we're going to do it. Like, I was like, is this thing on? Is this fucking thing on? Like, and dad, I'm the bald guy. I'm the only bald person on this call, and dad. And, I've have a halfway decent sense of humor. And so I try to make light of it, but it's still like this perception that, a class parent is really a synonym for a class mom. And this is the liberal-minded school that talks about all the right-minded things you should be talking about. Yet the idea of a class dad, I might as well be a dodo bird. Like,
right. It's very like, yeah, the WhatsApp group this year is a little different, but the hey moms thing, it's toned down. And I would never, like you, I would never say anything. It's not my position to go make a statement here and say, hey, I don't feel included. But I'm still going to be on the WhatsApp group.
Yeah. I've often joked, Nathan, that, one of the loneliest places in the world for a dad to be is on a playground with his child and the playground is filled with moms and caregivers. Like nobody talks to the dad. Is there a Miami Beach, a South Beach equivalent of that? Or once you get your kids, instead of taking them to the stupid park with the same old, jungle gym, if you take them to the beach, is it, do you find, jokes aside, that it's a little more accepting, a little more free, and they're having a little bit more fun?
So a couple things. I have made a point of like killing everyone with kindness. So if I was at the playground, I'd go talk to the nannies because they're always on one side, and I go talk to the moms and chat with them or the dads. And it took me a little while to just get over that. Like, I'm not going to let this become a thing. I'll just go say hello to everyone. And here in Miami, it's been one of those things where I am going to show up if there's a class party or an event. Or a great example this year was trunk or treat, which I didn't know what that was. I Googled it. I mean, you could have a whole magazine and Wikipedia on trunk or treat.
Is it like candy in somebody's trunk or no? Am I missing?
Yeah, Paul, it's full on competitive. So they take the school parking lot and parents get dressed and dress the trunk of their car. And then all the kids in the school come out and get candy at each trunk.
Oh my goodness.
It's serious. Google it. It's crazy.
Were you able to keep up? Did you had some competition there? The new dad in Miami.
It was, the spots were signed by the PTA president. So I may not have been, and I may not have had like the inside track because I had the last space in the lot, which was fine because I was next to the cops.
Mr. Richardson, you'll be number 532 right over here by the dumpster. Like what? What? How did I get that?
I was next to the cops. My kids loved it. They loved that I was doing it. And I said hello. I made a point of going around and saying hello. It was all moms, except for this one guy next to me, Elliot, who was amazing. He was like super.
Wait. They put Elliot next to you. So they put the two dads next to the cops for trunk or treat?
Yeah. I didn't even think of that. But Elliot played a game. Elliot like collects cars. So he shows up with like this like Scooby-Doo van, puts up a tent, and puts on a full-on Darth Vader costume. So like, I could have like, I could have had like been giving kids gold bullions, and he would have looked great. But he was amazing. He and I actually chatted. He's a car guy, and he was into my car, and he's like, you need to go get it ceramic coated. And it was just like an easy conversation. Now I see him at drop off. He's like, yeah, your car was on their Instagram. It was so cool. I'm so glad that worked out. And like, but then the moms, like, like they all had their own like, organism of hierarchy and who says hello to who. I just say hello to all of them.
Right.
And try to chat with all of them. And like when there were breaks, I'd go chat with other people. And I'm not like Mr. Extrovert or like I have to go chat with people, but I'm like, I'm going to make a point of like getting to know people here.
I got to ask, what was your costume if you're standing next to Darth Vader?
Oh my gosh, now that you say that, what was my costume? Did I dress?
I always go as Gru from Despicable Me. That's an easy one for me. Like,
I know. I was like a village person. I was the village guy with like a big headdress.
All right.
So I tried. It was, the cops were great to talk to the officer. She had 3 kids. So we talked about that. Got to talk to the teachers, and I made a point of chatting with moms, and there were the usual meltdowns of like the bickering of the moms between each other and some of that, and like, why am I in that spot and not that spot? And I was just like, or you didn't call me when my kids class was coming. I'm like, well, you were supposed to be here all day. Like, you're not supposed to leave your nanny at your Tesla and go get your hair done.
You got to refill the candy. You can't leave it unattended.
She was yelling at the PTA president. I'm like, you realize you're never getting invited to anything later. Like, you cannot cross the PTA mafia. And you just did.
You're done. You're dead.
I'm like, just be nice and smile and give out candy and be done with trunk or treat. Oh my God. But it was a great way for me to meet folks and get insights into who's who. And, I don't think it was intentional that I was at the end of the lot with the only other dad, but if it is, hey, we had a great time.
Next year you get a t-shirt that says I'm with Darth Vader. You'd be fine.
Okay. And by the way, Elliot, not only did his van was the Scooby-Doo van, Paul, he brought a fan. So it's like you're in the Miami sun and heat, and he brings a like electric blower. So everyone's coming by to like get into his fan to cool off. And I'm like, oh, I'm like,
you gotta up your game. You can't just be like the New Yorker who comes down and thinks, hey, I'm from New York. Like this guy
right?
sounds like Darth Vader had game.
He had, his game was serious. Like, I mean, and by the way, he didn't really decorate the van. He just put like a plastic thing up.
Yeah.
But he had a tent around it, and like the tent that goes with the van. I was like, forget it.
Nathan,
but he's awesome. He's gonna become like my drop off buddy.
I love it. Nathan, thanks so much for being on the Company of Dads podcast. One last question: are you Florida man forever now?
That's a big TBD, Paul. I think.
Okay. All right. That'll be for the next one.
Yeah. Anyway, great seeing you. Thanks, Paul.
Buddy.